The Russian Defense Ministry claims that America is still sitting on 10% of its chemical weapons stockpile and that this is in violation of Washington's commitments under a chemical disarmament convention. Jacqueline Vuga has the story.
Back in the 90s, both the U.S. and Russia signed the Chemical Weapons Convention's Arms Control Treaty, and that pact prohibits the use, deployment, and stockpiling of chemical weapons. And yet, a statement from the Russian Defense Ministry has highlighted the fact that the U.S. has yet to meet its obligations with that. According to the statement, the U.S. still has around 10% of its chemical weapons arsenal, and that it's kept combat ready. Meanwhile, Russia was already able to say last September that it had destroyed all of its chemical weapons, and that was done ahead of schedule. President Putin hailed that as a historic moment, whereas the U.S. has repeatedly pushed back their deadline, using an excuse that Putin found to be rather lacking.
Russia and the US were the largest possessors of chemical weapons, but now only the United States is. Unfortunately, they do not fulfill their obligations regarding deadlines to destroy their chemical weapons. The terms of destruction have been postponed 3 times already, including under the pretext of a lack of sufficient budget funds.
Now, the idea that they simply lacked funding really is hard to reconcile with the fact that the U.S. has a massive military budget every single year. Now, we contacted the U.S. Department of Defense to comment on these claims coming from the Russian Ministry of Defense, and they have sent us on to contact the State Department, so we'll see what happens there. And this all comes as Washington has once again accused President Assad of using chemical weapons and of Moscow supporting the Syrian leader in that. Russia has, of course, objected to those accusations on a number of fronts. First of all, there's the fact that all chemical weapons were, in fact, removed from Syria back in 2014 and destroyed. That was all carried out by Russian authorities and confirmed by the OPCW at the time. Plus, there's the fact that these investigations that have been conducted into chemical attacks in Syria really have been quite flawed. Those who were conducting the investigation never actually went to the site, and any evidence that was collected was actually sent out of the country by people who were actually part of opposition forces, which, of course, would be a distinct conflict of interest.